Akhandamandala tam yena characharam tatpadam darshitam yena tasmai shri gurave namaha tasmai shri gurave namaha. Salutations to the Guru, whose form is an indivisible whole of presence, and by whom is pervaded the moving and the non-moving beings, by whom is revealed out of grace that feat of indivisible presence. Salutations to that Guru. So friends, we have assembled here to reflect on a very bold experiment and a pioneering experiment at that was conducted by a cadre of very sincere Vedanta aspirants, spiritual aspirants, in 1899/1900. So even though the experiment was conducted 114 years ago, the sadhana of this group of people continues to inspire us and propels us to redouble our efforts in our spiritual quest. So the story begins, as I said, in about 1899. As you know, Swami Vivekananda first came to this country in 1893, and he got tremendous appreciation, and he sowed in his first visit, which was about 2.5, 3 years. In his first visit, he sowed the seeds of Vedanta in various parts of the country. And then, after he went back to India, Swami Abhedananda, another brother disciple, was here in New York City, having his own ministry. But when Swami Vivekananda decided to come for the second time, it was very obvious that just the two Swamis was not enough, and they definitely needed more Swamis. So Swami Vivekananda then asked another of his Guru Bhais or brother disciples, Harinath Chattopadhyay, whose monastic name is Swami Tirthananda. So he told to Swami Tirthananda, Hari Bhai, I am laying down my life inch by inch. Wouldn't you help a little? And the context here is that when Swami Vivekananda first mentioned it to Hari Bhai, Swami Tirthananda declined because he was a very austere monk, wanted to live a contemplative life. He would wander from one place to another, no fixed residence, and he didn't like preaching or lecturing. But then when Swami Vivekananda pleaded so sincerely, Hari Bhai relented. Swami Tirthananda agreed to come. So Swami Tirthananda and Sister Nivedita, they came together with Swami Vivekananda on their second trip. And at that time in New York City, there was a kind of a residence called the Vedanta home, and there was a young novice in that home. He was a Dutch American. His name was Cornelius Hebloom. But by that time, he had taken brahmacharya vows from Swami Abhedananda. His now name was Guru Das, servant of the Guru. So when Swami Tirthananda first arrived, they all settled in New York City, and we have some very interesting incidents that Swami Atulananda writes in his book, With the Swamis in America. So, as I said, Swami Tirthananda was a very austere Swami, was very much at unease with all the trappings of, let's say, a public life. So, very much an independent soul. So, one day it so happened that Guru Das and Swami Tirthananda are having an after-supper walk in New York City, in a very fashionable part of New York City. And Swami Tirthananda, whenever he would get very excited, he would raise his hands and raise his voice. So then he, in the middle of the road, as you can imagine, there are onlookers, and he says, Gurudas, break free of this cage, be like a lion. So the context is to a very famous Sanskrit shloka which says, Nirgachati jagat jalat pinjareva kesari. So don't confine yourself like a lion. If the lion is in a cage, you can imagine the lion doesn't want to. And so he's telling that to Gurudas. But as you can imagine, the people around him, I'm sure, they were very taken aback or askance. Then another very interesting incident that Gurudas tells is that Gurudas one evening, he comes to that Vedanta home and says, Swami, there is a very fine concert tonight. It's an oratorio, and I think you will like it. You have never heard our Western music? Let us go. Very simple request, I guess. Swami Tirthananda, he says, but why should you care for these things? You have had enough of that. Let us stay here and read something nice and have a good talk. These amusements we must give up now if we want mother. So you can imagine, he's very austere and very strict in that sense, that for him, for Swami Tirthananda, thinking of the mother, meditating on the mother by mother, I mean here the divine mother, of course. So that was all that he really wanted to be associated with. So this is kind of the setting for our Shanti Ashrama. This Gurudas, he has taken brahmacharya vows. He needs to be in a monastery. In the Indian tradition, a spiritual aspirant has to live in an ashram. The ashram, the root word, the Sanskrit root word for ashram is shram. That means the efforts that a spiritual aspirant does and the austerities that he undertakes. So where would he stay? I mean, in this country, of course, there was nothing really close to that. So at that time, there was a very fortuitous confluence of events. There was a disciple of Swami Vivekananda. Her name was Mini Book. Mini Book said, well, Swami, I have a 160-acre piece of land in the San Antonio Valley of California, and I would be glad to donate that piece of land if you want to set up an ashram. So Swami Vivekananda agreed, and there was, as I said, another group of 10 to 12 people who also were very, very interested in living an ashram life. So that is how the idea for the Shanti Ashrama came into being. But they wanted, the devotees, of course, wanted Swami Vivekananda to bring them to that retreat, to that ashrama. But Swami Vivekananda, of course, was so full of commitments that he then asked his Hari Bhai, Swami Tirthananda. And they were contemporaries. Swami Vivekananda, as you know, was born on January 12th, 1863. Swami Tirthananda just 9 days earlier, January 3rd. So they were very close friends as well. So when Swami Vivekananda asked Swami Tirthananda to go to Shanti Ashrama, so the conversation is very interesting. So he says, it is the will, so Swami Vivekananda says, it is the will of the Divine Mother that you should take charge of the work there. There, of course, means Shanti Ashrama. So Swami Tirthananda smiles and he says, Mother's will? Rather say it is your will. Certainly, you have not heard the mother communicate her will to you in this matter. But then Swami Vivekananda grew grave. He says, yes, brother, if your nerves become very fine, then you will be able to hear mother's words directly. And he spoke with such intensity that Swami Tirthananda was convinced that this was indeed the mother's plan. So then Swami Tirthananda agreed, and that is where our journey begins. So, and before I go to that, let me just mention one quick thing. So when it was agreed that Swami Tirthananda would guide these retreatants to the Shanti Ashrama, Swami Vivekananda then told these disciples, I have only talked, but I shall now send you one of my brethren who will show you how to live what I have taught. And so Swami Tirthananda was well known even before he came to the United States as a monk who lived by the principles. So then they meaning the group from New York City, they all started together. Swami Vivekananda they would go together till Detroit, and Swami Vivekananda then had to dissociate himself from this group. So when the time came for the final goodbye, Swami Tirthananda asked Swami Vivekananda, well, I'm now going to this place. Give me some advice. So Swamiji said 4 things. He said, forget India, number 1. Go to the land meaning, of course, the Shanti Ashrama. Establish the center, and Mother will do the rest. And Swami Tirthananda later said to his disciples that I followed the advice of Swami Vivekananda very religiously, except for the forgetting India part. I could not do that. So in August 2nd August 1900, this group of about 8 people, they start to go to this Shanti Ashrama. Now, I have to tell you, there, of course, was this 160-acre piece of land, but it was in the middle of nowhere. Very remote place to even get to, and had no amenities whatsoever. There was just one cabin, one building, and that was about it. So these people, these 8-10 people, they had to carry everything, food supplies, tents, clothing, everything with them. So they start, of course, from San Francisco. They take the train to San Jose. They stay overnight in San Jose in a hotel. The next morning, they start on this journey. So from San Jose, they first have to go up the mountain to a place called Mount Hamilton, where there's a very famous observatory, Lick Observatory, which exists even today. And so this ride, Swami Atulananda writes, sorry, not Swami Atulananda, this was another, one of these retreatants, Ida Ansel writes, we stayed overnight in a small hotel. Next morning at daybreak, set out by horse-drawn stagecoach. This part of the journey was the most pleasant. The road, a fairly good and well-traveled one, wandered through fragrant fruit orchards, through vineyards, olive groves, past well-kept farms and dairies, and at length wound twisting 365 miles, times in 5 miles, up Mount Hamilton to Lick's Observatory, which is at an elevation of about 4,200 feet. So it was a wonderful direction, wonderful vantage point. And at this stage, and in this part of the journey, so the youngest was Ida Ansel, maybe about 20, 21 years. So Swami Tirthananda asked her, well, Ida, why did you come with us? You are only a young girl. What shall you do there? And Ida replies, a very cryptic, difficult to understand reply. She says, I go there, Swami, because I want to become butter. Now, what exactly does it mean? Well, we have to really go to the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. And many, many times Sri Ramakrishna gave this analogy that if you are milk, then if you add water to it, the milk absorbs all this water. If you add some contaminants to it, it gets in. So there's no way the milk can separate it. But once it becomes butter, if you put it on top of water, even then it will float, it will not be contaminated. So the idea being purify yourself. And so Ida had surely read the gospel, and so that pleased Swami Tirthananda a lot. So all I'm trying to say is that this group was really a very, very sincere group. So we talked of their journey until Mount Hamilton, but then from there it's kind of downhill literally and figuratively. Why? Because at Mount Hamilton, the original plan was that somebody would come with the horse carriage and other means of transportation, and they would bring this group down to the Shanti Ashrama. But this man turned up with just one small carriage, and when they asked him, he said, well, this is all I could gather. He was a homesteader, he was a rancher. This is all I could gather. So they said, well, we have all this stuff, what can we do? He says, well, we will go today, then I will come back maybe a couple of days later, and then we can take them, but definitely not today. So that was the first shock. So one person had brought a bicycle with him. He had to carry his bicycle with him. Somehow 6 people, they fit in the carriage, some with their feet dangling, and 2 on horses. So they are going, and of course this is August, very hot summer day, and in the middle of this journey, the lady who was on the horse, Mrs. Agnes, she collapsed. So when she collapsed, of course, she couldn't go on the horse anymore. So Swami Tirthananda insisted that she sit in this carriage, and Swami Tirthananda then rode a horse. He had never ridden a horse before in his life, and you can imagine. So he says, well, when we finally reached the place, the Shanti Ashrama, it was late in the evening, I kind of rode regally into this place like a king. But as I have said, there was no way these people could really have a pleasant night because they couldn't bring anything with them. And Miss Book, who had gone to that place before this group, when she went, she found that all her furniture had been appropriated by the other homesteaders. So this was a very challenging night, and their first meal at the Shanti Ashrama was a very grand meal of boiled rice and brown sugar. And it is very ironic that today, in the Thanksgiving weekend, we are talking of this meal. Anyway, so as you can imagine, Swami Tirthananda, when he saw all this, he became very nervous. He had some idea of the challenge, but he never could comprehend such dire conditions. So in 2-3 days have passed. He is muttering to himself, "Oh, mother, what have you done? Where have you brought me? How will we survive?" They started running out of money. So at this time, another of these retreatants, Mrs. Agnes, she heard Swami Tirthananda, and then she said, "Swami, why are you so dejected? Where is your mother? Have you lost faith in her? Do not fear. She will make everything all right." And Swami Tirthananda then, of course, he realized how wrong he was. And at that time, Mrs. Agnes, she gave all her money. She put it in the cloth of Swami Tirthananda, and Swami Tirthananda was very impressed. And so he said, "Well, from now on, your name will be Shraddha." Shraddha in Sanskrit means one who has firm faith in God. So this group was a very hardy bunch. So they soon established this place. They pitched in tents. The source of water, there was of course no electricity. The source of water was very far off, but they established a schedule whereby the men would bring the water for cooking and all. And so very soon a schedule was established. And you can say, by looking at the schedule, that it was very much like a schedule that we today try to follow when we go on a retreat. So, as you can see, 5 a.m., wake up, the men go to take bath. As I said, they had to walk a distance. And Swami Atulananda writes that this schedule was followed in winter and summer. And in winter, by the time they would come back, their towels would be frozen stiff because of all this water that would then freeze. So very challenging conditions. But they established this schedule. After coming back from bath, 1 hour of meditation, breakfast at 8, then some individual duties, Bhagavad Gita class at 10, meditation again for an hour at 11, lunch at 1, then time for each person's activities, dinner at 7, 2-hour meditation 8 to 10 p.m., and then retire to tent at 10. So, but Swami Tirthananda, he again and again repeatedly he emphasized the need for meditation. And whenever people would ask him some kind of question, like he would say, well, you have to overcome your body consciousness. Whenever somebody would say, but how, Swami? He would say, by meditation. So he put tremendous emphasis on meditation. And that you can see in this daily schedule. So now let us look at some incidents. As I said, Swami Tirthananda hated lecturing. He did not have any time in this schedule for his talk or lecture. The Bhagavad Gita class was, as you can imagine, they would take each shloka, but it was not a lecture really. So, pencil sharpening, first incident. So this is Ida Ansel, whose name then became Ujjwala. Ujjwala writes, one time I was preparing to take notes of Swami Tirthananda's talk, sharpening a pencil with a dull knife. The result was a jagged, unsymmetrical point. Just then the Swami walked by, picked up the pencil and remarked, "This is a sample of your work." With the same knife, he carefully whittled the jagged wood to a smooth, sharp point. Handing the pencil back to Ujjwala, he said, "Make every act an act of worship. Whatever you do, do as an offering to the Divine Mother, and do it as perfectly as you can." So you can imagine. So these are just some incidents, and so Swami Tirthananda would say again and again, whatever you do it as an offering to the Divine Mother. Then in another incident, there was just some idle chit-chat, I guess, going on. And Swami Tirthananda, then he saw Ujjwala or Ida, and he gave, this time, kind of an advice. The advice was very, very interesting. He said, and Ujjwala writes that the advice was kind of, it wasn't really coherent in the sense that it didn't really stem from the discussion that they were having. But Swami Tirthananda said, "In matters of opinion, swim with the current. In matters of principle, stand firm as a rock." That's all. And he said, and he just walked by. And Ujjwala, of course, it took her some time to absorb and digest this. But then she writes, "That was all, but he had given me in a moment guidance for a lifetime." And let us reflect a little bit on it. What exactly is Swami Tirthananda trying to say here? Matters of opinion swim with the current. So I guess what he was trying to say is that we spend so much of our time thinking about inconsequential things and worrying about them and debating and arguing. And so if we could somehow let that go, how? Well, go with the current. That means whatever we decide, either through the ballot box or whatnot. If we can let that go, then what that will do is it will clear us to have a very strong moral compass. And then in case there is something which impacts our principles, we can be firm as a rock. Because if we are frittering away our energy for everything and anything that comes to our attention, then we can't stand firm as a rock on matters of principle because we just don't have the energy. So I think that is what he was trying to say. Next one. As I have said before, Swami Tirthananda was a very stern disciplinarian. He hated idle talk. He hated people kind of doing nothing. So one day, these retreatants, these Shanti ashramites, were having some discussion, and he just happened to be there. And he said, "You always like to gossip. Useless talk brings much trouble. You begin to discuss others and go on at a great rate talking foolishness. Why do you criticize others? Look at your own faults and be silent." Kind of the prayer that we always say, Holy Mother's prayer, grace prayer, same kind of sentiment. Why do you criticize others? Look at your own faults and be silent. That is why I sometimes ask you to observe silence and live alone in this retreat. Silence is called mauna in Sanskrit. It means not only abstaining from speech, but the indrawing of all the senses, looking inward, centering the mind on Atman. The mind is always curious, always reaches out for news. I see whenever it is mail day, you run for your letters, and the following 24 hours, though your body is here, your mind is in San Francisco. Give up being curious about nonsensical things. Be curious about mother and how to love her. Make the best of your time. Life is short. Don't waste your energy in useless pursuits. Know the Atman alone and give up all other talk. And so you can imagine this must have hit these ashramites very strongly. Then Swami Tirthananda gave them a little idea of how life in India, or how some perspectives in India were very different. So Swami Tirthananda writes, they would gather flowers, they would present it to Swami Tirthananda, and he would then take it and put it at the shrine. And so Swami Tirthananda, Guru Das, he asks, Swami, don't you care for flowers? And the question was, he just takes it, puts it there, there's no emotion, no nothing. And so Swami says, Tirthananda says, oh yes, otherwise how could I offer them to the master? But we never smell flowers before offering them to God. So the Swami Tirthananda, Guru Das, he was kind of confounded that why doesn't the Swami smell the flowers before he takes it to the altar? And Swami Tirthananda says, no, in India we don't do that because it is such a divine offering that we don't kind of partake of it before we offer. Okay, automatic writing, another of Swami Tirthananda's blows. So there was a lady in this ashram, and she started practicing what we can now say automatic writing. Automatic writing is kind of when your mind is taken over by somebody else and then you communicate. Planchette, some people call it. So what this lady would do, she would take a pencil and she would then try to communicate with this dead person. The hand would begin to move and write, and afterwards they would see that there were beautiful things written on the paper. So it was kind of grabbing the attention of a lot of the ashramites. And Swami Tirthananda, of course, it came to his attention. And when it came to his attention, he rebuked her severely. So he says, what is this foolishness? Do you want to be controlled by spooks? Give up that nonsense. We want mukti, liberation. We want to go beyond this world and all other worlds. Why should you want to communicate with the departed? Leave them in peace. It is all Maya. Get out of Maya and be free. So you can imagine how that lady must have felt. Now, life, as I have said, was very hardscrabble, very challenging. So they have this, the next incident that I would like to recollect is the incident of a snake. So the Swami had a tent, and the tent had a wooden floor. And one day, between the floor and the earth, just as the Swami was about to enter his tent, they saw a big rattlesnake. Okay, so now, of course, this is a serious situation. What to do? And soon there was a debate because they believed in non-violence. They ate vegetarian food, so there were two camps. One camp said, well, kill this snake because, of course, that will solve this problem forever. The other camp said, no, let's just try to resolve this situation without killing the snake. So this camp won, and what they decided to do was to take this snake far away. Now, how? Of course, we are now talking of who's to bell the cat. So Swami Tirthananda writes, to catch a large venomous snake and carry her off was not so easy, but we managed it. the snake was driven from under the tent, and we stood around her from a respectable distance. She was rattling with all her might. You might remember Sri Ramakrishna's story about the snake that would not hiss. So this was definitely a snake that was hissing. So it was rattling all the time. She was rattling with all her might. Evidently she was angry, but she did not try to attack. She was very watchful, coiled up, her head raised, and turning towards anyone who came a little nearer. First of all, we held her down with long sticks, and then managed to put a loop of string around her neck, and two of us carried her to a safe distance, holding her aloft by each end of the string. There we again held her down with sticks, as before, and carefully cut the pieces of rope on either side. And they thought it was job done, so they came back, and lo and behold, the snake also came back. And now, how would they recognize whether it's the same snake or not? They said it is the same snake because, as Swami Tirthananda writes, Guru Das writes, there was this rope that was strung to her neck. And so afterwards, they started calling this snake as the snake with the necktie. So you can imagine when we have a group of people staying in this ashram and we saw a schedule that it is very logical that people would want some kind of rules, some kind of regulations. So once a student asked the Swami to make some rules, and Swami Tirthananda's reply was very unambiguous. He says, "Why do you want rules? Is not everything going on nicely and orderly without formal rules? Don't you see how punctual everyone is, how regular we all are? No one is ever absent from the classes or meditations. Mother, the Divine Mother that is, has made her own rules. Let us be satisfied with that. Why should we make rules of our own? Let there be freedom, but no license. That is Mother's way of ruling. We have no organization, but see how organized we are. This kind of organization is lasting, but all other kinds of organization break up in time. This kind of organization makes free. All other kinds are binding. This is the highest organization. It is based on spiritual laws." So moving on. One day, a new ashramite comes into this ashram, and she comes to Swami Tirthananda's tent, and she brings a bundle of firewood, and she keeps it in front of him. And Swami Tirthananda immediately realized what she was doing. What she was doing was something that is listed in many Vedas, as well as there is a very famous phrase in the Mundakopanishad. It says, "Tad vijnanartham sa gurumeva abhigachet samitpanih shrotriyam brahmanishtam." And the English translation is, "To know that reality, he should go with a sacrificial bundle of firewood in hand, only to a teacher versed in the Vedas and absorbed in the Brahman." So this lady somehow, how we don't know, somehow knew about this, and that's why she brought this bundle of firewood, and Swami Tirthananda appreciated it very much. Then we come to an incident that impacted Swami Tirthananda directly. So they had, as we have seen, these meditation sessions. During one of these meditation sessions, a beetle bit Swami Tirthananda. And of course, he was in meditation, he didn't even realize. But after the meditation ended, people saw that his hand began to swell. And then he said, "Well, I think I felt the sting of an insect, and I just waved my hand and the insect fell off." So that was the sting he was referring to. And the swelling increased. They tried some kind of quick things, didn't help. They could not bring down the swelling. And the following day, the entire arm was swollen. And Guru Das writes, "And we became alarmed. What to do? The nearest doctor, as you have seen, this place is in the middle of nowhere. The nearest doctor was 50 miles away. We had no motor, only a horse and a two-wheeled cart. Neither was there a motor road, nor could a car cross the mountain. But something had to be done without further delay. The poison was spreading. So you can imagine the anxiety these people had. And then something very miraculous happened. In the evening, a gentleman came to our ashrama. And how would this gentleman come? Of course, on foot. So he had walked 50 miles all the way. So they asked him, where are you coming from? He said, I'm coming from New York. So you can imagine, this is San Antonio Valley in California. He's coming from New York. He had walked 50 miles, and he was a doctor. So he said, I had somehow heard of this place. I just wanted to see how it was. So you can imagine how providential this was. So this doctor then made some incisions, and he said, of course, that any delay might have proved fatal. He gave a few simple medicines, some disinfectants, and soon the Swami was out of danger. It was like a miracle. The Divine Mother had sent this young doctor to save the Swami's life. Now, my final incident, as we keep looking at the clock, my final incident is something which I think we can directly take even today. I mean, it would serve us well even today. So this advice, the context is that there was some free time, as we have said, in the afternoon, and some people, they read. So there was one lady. She was reading a book on new thought. And Swami Tirthananda noticed it. And then he says, go to the source. Don't waste your time reading the ideas of every fool who wants to preach religion. There are thousands of books on religion. You cannot read them all. Therefore, select the best. Only those who have realized the truth can speak with authority. Otherwise, it is the blind leading the blind. Both come to grief, both fall into the ditch. Only the true Guru can lead us right, and the true Guru is he who knows Brahman. So I'm sure all of us have had this situation where we would like to read a book, but we don't have the time, and we have to make choices. And so this advice by Swami Tirthananda, I think, would serve us very well as to how do we select what we want to read. So now we come to this ashram life, very hard life, did have a very bad consequence on Swami Tirthananda's health. And Swami Vivekananda, who was then back in India, when he heard about it, he said, well, please send Hari Bhai, brother Hari, back to India. And so Swami Tirthananda then decided that he would go back. So when that time came, he says to Gurudas, one day, just the day before he was to leave, he says to Gurudas, Gurudas, the Divine Mother is upset at me. So Gurudas says, why? What happened, Swami? He says, well, yesterday the Divine Mother came to me and she said, don't go, stay here. And I said, no, I have to go. So I am violating the Divine Mother's wish. I am upset, but she is my mother, so why should I care? And then on that day when he is to depart, he says to Gurudas, Gurudas, I have told you everything. I have kept nothing hidden from you. Now you take over. And of course, Gurudas says, well, Swami, I am not capable. I don't know much. What can I do? So he says, well, Swami, Gurudas says, but that is impossible, Swami. But then Swami Tirthananda says, depend on Mother for everything, trust in her, and she will guide you. She will not let you go astray. I am sure of that. One thing remember, never boss anyone. Look upon all alike, treat all alike, no favorites, hear all, and be just. And so that was Swami Tirthananda's last advice to Guru Das. And it so happened that Swami Tirthananda, he advanced his departure from the Shanti Ashrama because he wanted to meet Swami Vivekananda. He had heard that Swami Vivekananda was ill, but in those days he took a steamer, a ship. So when the ship reached Rangoon, Burma, he saw in the newspapers, the news that was 3 days later, 3 days before Swami Vivekananda had passed away. So when he saw that piece of news, of course, he was very heartbroken. But let us now look at one story after Swami Tirthananda left the Shanti Ashrama. So this is the story of Shankari. She was one of the retreatants, one of the ashramites. Some years after Swami Tirthananda had returned to India, Shankari contracted a painful disease. Patiently and with great courage, she battled with the enemy. She suffered pain without a complaint. She struggled silently. But the disease had taken a firm hold on her, and she could not shake it off. The end was drawing near, and she realized that her days on earth were counted. So she called one of her friends, Meera. She said, "The Master is calling me. Meera, the Master is calling me. Will you repeat his name to me?" So this friend Meera stayed at her bedside the entire day and the following night. In turns, she and the patient called on the Lord. Shankari grew weaker and weaker. Her voice came in a whisper. "Do not exert yourself, dear," Meera said. "I am strong, and I shall continue to call on the Lord." Satisfied and with a smile, Shankari obeyed. Early morning came. The patient was very weak. She moved her head slightly as if trying to look at Meera. A soft whisper came, "Ramakrishna," and the lips were silent forever. So we see how deep impact this Shanti Ashrama life had on these ashramites. Moving on to Swami Tirthananda. Swami Tirthananda, when he came back to India, he pretty much resumed his itinerant life. He would visit places, stay in some place for some time, then move on, always absorbed in meditation. Very remarkable life he led. In 1922, he knew that his end was coming near. So one day he said to his attendant, "I'm going to live for another week. So if you have any questions, if you want anything done, this is your time, 7 days time." The day before, Swami Akhandananda, Gangadhar Maharaj, who came from Shargachi to see him. So this is in Banaras, Varanasi. Swami Tirthananda, this is the day before last. So Swami Akhandananda comes, and on the last day, so the two are sitting together. Swami Tirthananda, of course, lying on his bed. So he says to Gangadhar, that means Akhandananda Maharaj, "Gangadhar, please repeat this." This is a very famous Upanishadic statement, "Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma." So Gangadhar Maharaj says, he says "Abar" in Bengali, which means again. So 3 times he says. And then Swami Tirthananda makes a very strange statement. He says, and it's, I'm sorry, it's in the Sanskrit font, in the Devanagari font. He says, "Brahma Satyam, Jagat Satyam, Satye Satyam Pratishthitham." And that is his last words. Now let us reflect in a couple of minutes as to why this is a very, very mysterious statement. Well, it plays on this very famous Shankaracharya half of a shloka, which says, "Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya." So Shankaracharya is very clear. In this relative world, whatever you see, whatever you experience is not real. Brahman alone is real. And just before passing away, Swami Tirthananda says, Brahma Satyam, Jagat Satyam. So, what does it mean? I think it means that Swami Tirthananda is looking at it from not from the perspective of a jnani, but from the perspective of a vijnani. So, the best way to look at it is that a jnani, he is doing this neti, not this, to reach this final goal. And a vijnani, having reached that final goal, is now looking at the world, and the world cannot be anything but Brahman and but truth. And so that is why he says, from his perspective, Brahma Satyam, Jagat Satyam. Satye Satyam Pratishthitam. That means truth will establish itself in truth alone. We got some chance to look at a remarkable experiment, a remarkable life or remarkable lives. Today, the Shanti Ashrama is managed by the Vedanta Society of Northern California. They have a retreat once a year, one weekend in April. And this middle picture is of this meditation cabin, which is the cabin where, of course, Swami Tirthananda, but also Swami Abhedananda, Swami Sardananda, Swami Trigunatitananda, all of them have meditated. So it's a very auspicious place, a place of pilgrimage. This to your right, the bottom right picture, that is the picture of what is known as the Om tree. The Om tree was so named by Swami Trigunatitananda, who followed Swami Tirthananda. And Swami Trigunatitananda did not really have the kind of an ashram environment as Swami Tirthananda did. He brought people to Shanti Ashrama for weekends and sometimes for extended periods of time, but not living all the time. So Swami Trigunatitananda used to meditate under that tree, so now it's called the Om tree. And today, when once a year, pilgrims, when they visit this place, you can see it becomes very lively. Of course, it is very inspiring. And so when we get a chance to look at this event or this time, not only are we inspired to follow in the footsteps of our spiritual ancestors who, as you have seen, were so steadfast in their devotion to Vedanta. And it also it's also one of the reasons why the Ramakrishna movement, the Vedanta movement in this country is so stable and so strong. It's because of the ashramites who, and the likes, the ashramites who went to Shanti Ashram. So with that, let us pray to Sri Ramakrishna and the Holy Mother that we also be given more encouragement to redouble our efforts in our spiritual quest. Thank you.